Hey, hello everybody, I'm live. Let me start this by saying that I am not a Tezuka expert, not by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I'm an Osamu Tezuka noob. I basically know as little as you would expect someone who's 33 and from America to know about Osamu Tezuka. He's never really been popular in my lifetime like that. He died in the 80s. Um, there were Astro Boy remakes and stuff in the early 2000s, and even there was like a Western one. But I didn't see that. I was like, I don't know, too old at the time. Like I was deep into anime then, but in a way where I was looking at Astro Boy as like, I don't know, some old kids show. Like I didn't see that as something relevant to me as an anime fan who was 12 or 13 years old, in which is a shame because I probably would have liked it. But at the time, my mentality towards it was like, I don't know, this is just old stuff. Um, and I'm trying to think what actually is the first Tezuka thing that I consumed. Um, because I want to say Young Blackjack was like my road into actually starting to consume Tezuka because that came out in like 2015, I think, and I really enjoyed that. And no, actually, I think even before that, it was that I was I had this show called Spin the Crunchy Roulette for a while where I would hit the random button on Crunchyroll and watch like whatever came up. And one time, the 2004 OVA of Blackjack came on, and I watched all of that, and I really enjoyed that. And then I think I watched Young Blackjack. Maybe I had already seen it. I can't remember, but I know I watched those two first, and then I've seen some of the Blackjack movies and stuff, and read a little bit of the manga. And then I have the whole Dororo collection, and I love Dororo. I read the first Dark Horse Astro Boy collection at one point, and I think I ended up like selling that or giving it away or something. I don't know what I did with it. Maybe it's just in one of my mini collection. Maybe it's just in one of the three houses that has my stuff in it. But you know, um, it's not on hand. That's for sure. I have his Bomba book, but I haven't actually read that one yet. Um, You think Tezuka was a jujutsu sorcerer who reincarnated in my body? Well, so I've been developing I've come to realize the next step past gonzo journalism. So y'all probably know I've been calling myself a gonzo journalist for a long time. Gonzo is the style created by Hunter Thompson. And the it's weird because he's not really famous for this anymore. But what made him famous and what was the start of gonzo journalism was in his like I think late 20s, he joined the Hells Angels for the sake of investigating them, for the sake of writing about them. And he wrote this book from the perspective of like being in the gang and just talking about it in a very matter of fact way of like this is what these people are like, trying to give you a sense of what is it like to be a Hells Angel. And he got beaten within an inch of his life for having done this when they found out that he published this. Um, but it was successful. And then he wrote a whole bunch of other books and newspaper columns. And in particular, he wrote like little political columns and also football columns for like years and years and years on a weekly basis. And those are all collected into books and stuff. Um, one of the many workaholics that I have modeled my life after. I very much look up to people who make their life into their work. Like it's not just that they work a lot, but that they work for a lifestyle. Andrew Hussey was the first person I remember really talking about being this way. Homestuck's creator, like he would say like, it's not that I draw Homestuck, it's that I live Homestuck. I like wake up, I work on it all day, and then I go to bed. And that was his life for like however long he was working on Homestuck. And it probably still is his life working on his games and shit. Um, but that was also Tezuka's life, and Tezuka wrote constantly from like age 8 onwards, and then died at 60. 60 is a very young age to have left behind the amount of shit that he left. Like, people don't think about it as like Tezuka died young. Like, he did. 60 is young. We'd all consider that a pretty young age to die. He died of cancer. And I mean, he got stomach cancer, but in my opinion, the man worked himself to death. The human body cannot handle the amount of work he did for the amount of time he did it. I just don't think it's possible. Um, and especially because of the fact that it's not like he was low energy late in life. It's not like he slowed down. He literally like had to have his work materials taken away from him on his deathbed. As the legendary story goes, his last words were, "Let me work." But it's hard to put into perspective, like, how did that look from his why was he why was he doing that? And that's, I think, what I've been trying to comprehend. And like, so gonzo journalism is like, you have to become a part of something and sort of experience it yourself and talk about the experience. Even if it's just like, well, I'm a part of America, I'm talking about American politics. But Hunter was, was really investigative. He had connections. He knew the conversations. He knew what was going on. That's not possible anymore. You cannot be, there's no room in this world for a Hunter Thompson today. You would simply be killed if you knew that much. So I'm not even trying to be a gonzo journalist in like any kind of serious sense like that, the way that he was. What I am interested in is a new technique that I'm calling, I forgot the fucking word, method journalism, in which you, like a method actor, attempt to fully embody the subject that you're writing about. So rather than it being about immersion into a culture, it's more so immersion into a person, which is what Johnny Depp did when he played Hunter Thompson in Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas, the movie. Johnny Depp like slept underneath of Hunter Thompson's bed for a month, like literally spent all his waking time shadowing this man, learning everything about him, trying to become him for the sake of popular consciousness. And like, he did effectively do that. Like, most people's mental idea of who Hunter Thompson is literally Johnny Depp's performance. It was obviously quite spot on. But if you actually have listened to a lot of Hunter Thompson talk, like, he was nowhere near as actually like charismatic as the Johnny Depp character is. He was not like a fast talking guy. He spoke very slow and with a lot of interruption because he thought very hard about what he was going to say. Everything he would say would then be awesome, but you got to wait for it. The wheels got to turn. Not like me, just sputters like a motor. Insane last words indeed. Aggie says to keep the horrors at bay. So, well, that's the question. What horrors, though? So I talked about Tezuka with Nino on our last night's stream. We were up for like I was on stream for like 5 hours straight on Nino's stream. So you should go watch that. And I explained to him a whole lot of Tezuka's backstory. But in particular, he was curious, like, I wonder if he had, well, his theory was his family must have had some kind of Yakuza ties because of how much money they had. That was his belief. I don't know there's no way to historically substantiate that. That was just his belief. But Tezuka's family had a lot of fucking money. Tezuka's mom was taking him to Takarazuka theaters all the time when he was a kid. His dad was taking him to the movie theater all the time when he was a kid. His dad bought manga and books on the way home from work all the time, and he read them all. But he was also just a fucking genius. He was just a kid who literally knew how to read at like 7 or 8 years old and was reading his dad's books. And, you know, particularly though, reading like manga and picture books in magazines that his dad was bringing home. So, and this is at a time when there's like 3 manga that exist, you know, like it's a new concept basically to be drawing comics, sequential arts with stories in Japan. So, didn't his parents get shot outside of a theater? You're thinking of Batman, I believe, Gary. But so he as a kid, his parents took him to the different theaters. He was obsessed with Disney movies, saw them over and over and over again. Specifically, saw Snow White 50 times and Bambi 80, according to himself. Now, it is important to remember when we talk about Tezuka, the most important thing to remember about Tezuka when we talk about him is that he's full of shit. And I don't mean this in a way where I think he's like a liar. I just think he's a big-time exaggerator and a big-time omitter of detail. He was very much obsessed with protecting his legacy and trying to get his ideas out there to the highest extent that he could realize them. As many manga as this motherfucker drew, he drew a lot of them over and over again. He drew them more than once. He drew the same comics over and over again. Sometimes he would change the story and give it a different name, but it would be functionally the same book. And sometimes it's just literally he redrew the book like multiple times. Okay. Method journalism. When I talk about this, I'm trying to put myself into the headspace of what did it literally look like to be this person. What was life like for Osamu Tezuka? He was drawing. He was drawing. He was drawing, and he was trying to push everything out of his life that wasn't drawing as much as he could. But it wasn't even just drawing, because he was obsessed with film and theater and animation. And so like ultimately that was his goal, was to make like films and theater and animation. And so he tried to do all of that, and he wasn't as good at any of that as he was at drawing. So he went back to drawing, literally went back to the drawing board. Literally. Tezuka was sent back to the drawing board over and over again. Yakuman says Tezuka was probably autistic. Certainly. Tezuka was certain. I'm just gonna. I have no other way of. There's no fucking way this guy wasn't. I mean, definitely ADHD. No question about that. There's no question he would be put on that spectrum. That is considered kind of, if he's autistic, he's an incredibly high functioning, literal genius, autistic person. But like, the themes of his early comics are literally all about not being accepted by humanity and not wanting to be human. They're all about that. Literally every comic is about how he thinks humans are not great. He feels like he's part of the out group. He literally uses the same like 5 characters in every story. They're almost the only characters in those stories, like Monogatari level. Nobody else matters. The only time when groups are portrayed, they're always evil, they're always scary, even if they're like human or whatever. Like if they're supposed to be just regular townspeople, they're still bad. Like he's like a Stephen King level of fearing groupthink on a fundamental level. Like his number one fear is the people around me are gonna reject me because they don't think I'm human. That's like the undercurrent of everything. And like if you consider, Tezuka, as a school kid, literally made everyone read all of his shit. He read all of his class. He talks about this in his... Here, I'll go right over to the fucking chronology. His website has a very detailed chronology of his life story. Now, again, how much of this is like exaggerated? How much of this is full of shit, right? So, okay, here's him, 13 years old, this little soulless looking child with no light in his eyes. Him and his classmates established an animal lovers club. He was making a World of Animals bulletin. He had this color picture guide to beetles. He was doing all kinds of like pamphlets. He basically had access to all these, learning materials as a kid because his dad had all this stuff. So he would like copy all this information so that he could fucking notate every detail of the world around him, and inform everyone else around him about that information. But he's also in this period, age 15, right? Now it'll say something like this in this: draws the old man detective using a pen and ink for the first time with Hige Oyaji as the main character. That sentence might not mean anything to you by itself. The Old Man Detective is a full-length graphic novel. And moreover, that wasn't a thing that existed in this period of time. There was no such thing as a full-length graphic novel. It's just not a concept. He wouldn't have called it that. But at the front of each of the books that he wrote, he had a little thing that says, this is neither a manga nor a novel. Like he wrote that at the beginning because there just simply wasn't a concept of a graphic novel. But that's what he was doing. He would do a complete story in one book of like 100 to 200 pages. That's what he's famous for in the beginning, before he started doing series that became much more famous. But he was groundbreaking because he created graphic novels functionally. Like he popularized this idea in Japan of a comic that is a total story in a book. And then that was copied by Western artists in the 60s who literally named the term graphic novel after trying to replicate what the Japanese were doing with their books. So, in my opinion, Osamu Tezuka created graphic novels. In my opinion, also, graphic novels is an out-of-date term that we should replace. Graphic novel literally means picture book. So picture books should be like the adult form of a picture book should be a graphic novel. And what Tezuka does and what people still do should be called cinematic comics, in my opinion. That is what was unique about his comics, is that they are cinematic. He was drawing animation in still frames, like he was the reason his manga translated so well to 4 frame per second animation on TV is that's already what the content of the books was. It's already just animation in slow motion, because that's what his influences were. He did not have an abundance of manga. He had some. He had enough to decide to do manga, but like what he was trying to do with manga was make a cartoon, or make a movie, because he would go to the cinema, or make a play, Later on, he would be much more incorporating those Takarazuka elements, especially when he starts doing shoujo stuff. But he started off just doing shonen manga. No human women are in any of these books. The first years of his career, there's no human women in any of his books. There's like alien girls and plant girls. Like there's lots of man-made girls, or like creatures turned into sentient by men, like to be like basically created waifus. There's lots of manufactured waifus in his early stories and no human women. Hige Oyaji means the mustached old man. He is called Mustachio in English. And basically what Tezuka did was every character he created, he just reused them constantly. He would either literally use the same name or give them a new name but have the exact same character design. And usually they fall into the same tropes, like it's basically the same character whether it literally is or not. But if he does use the same name, there is some implication that some of those stories are connected. So it's like sometimes it's supposed to be the same guy, and sometimes it's just conceptually the same guy. But he only invented so many of these guys, and he really did it like one at a time. Like as you go through the comics, they get introduced but pretty early. Like he introduced all of his guys early on, and then he reused them forever. Yeah, Go Nagai did the same thing. But I mean, everyone copied everything that manga has done. He is the reason that it happened. I talked about this on Nino's live stream, but somebody told me on Twitter the other day that Tezuka basically had every artist as one of his assistants because he was on the run from his editors all the time, literally, physically on the run throughout the countryside of Japan, taking people wherever he goes to be his assistant while he's there until he has to run again. So he ended up being a direct influence on like all of these influential artists that would define the next generation because he was constantly running around bringing new people in as his assistants. I love this guy so fucking much. He's the most insane story. I truly think that the reason his life was possible is that he was kind of the most privileged Japanese person of his era. And I think the autism allowed him to digest World War II in a totally different way from everybody else. In a way that like autism is the only thing that explains it to me. Like it's the only type of a personality I've encountered that could have compartmentalized what had just happened in Japan and just like moved on immediately. Like the Tezuka's art, his work doesn't change before and after the war. Like it's the same exact stuff. The only difference is that there was a tiny hint of Japanese nationalism in his work before the end of the war that was slowly starting to creep in, and it disappeared the second the war was over. The nationalism was gone. And every year it feels like he was trying to be less racist and try to achieve world peace through his comics. Like his comics are all dedicated very much to world peace, but in particular the environmental peace. Like he doesn't care if humans wipe themselves out. He just hopes the next species like has a shot. You know, he hopes we do it in a way that doesn't kill the planet. That's all he cares about. He does not care about humanity that much. I'm telling you, all of this stuff I'm saying, like some of it is couched in knowing his backstory, but also some of it is just like if you read the stories, he just says the same thing over and over again. Like the books are unbelievably the same thing over and over again. But with like he just keeps taking the same essential elements and rearranging them slightly and drawing it a little better each time. And his artwork starts off like dog shit bad, you know. I'm impressed with these beetle drawings. I assume he copied these out of like an encyclopedia. Like he literally looked at another drawing and was copying a drawing, because that, or it's just he had a lot of time to do this when he was a kid and he didn't spend as much time as some of the drawings in his early comics. But it took him a while to get to a level. Well, not even a while. I'll say it was only a couple of years, but he drew a lot of fucking books and published them in that time. He published 14 books in his third year of doctorate school, doctor school, being school for, look at this, 1948, right? So, okay. 1946 is the year that he graduated secondary school and went to university to become a doctor. He has a doctor. He's what's the fucking exact wording I'm looking for? Also, there was a period where he worked as at an asbestos factory. I think this could have contributed to the cancer also. This could have had something to do with it. Maybe the fact that when he was 16, he worked at a fucking asbestos factory. That probably wasn't the best for his having cancer later. Not that anybody knew about that back then. So when he was 17, the middle school at this time was, you know, you only had elementary and middle, and then you go to university. So he goes to university in Osaka to be a doctor. And just at this point, like by the time he's 17, he's already drawn like 6 or 7 complete graphic novels in the last like 4 years since this period. Like from this moment when he was this kid, he starts drawing graphic novels and he does not stop. He also keeps drawing all these pamphlets, creating these little clubs to talk about insects and animals and shit when he's in middle school. A color picture book on comb jellies. That's adorable, just conceptually. It's totally random what stuff he notates that happened. Like, I guess this website, just anytime he mentioned that a thing happened at a time, they've notated it here. So it's probably just cobbled together from random interviews. So it's like March 28th, 1945, he saw the film Momotaro, A Divine Soldier of the Sea in Osaka. Like, I'm sure he mentions how that influenced one of his books at some point, but it's such a fucking random detail to be in this particular list of historical stuff. But yeah, so anyway, he's at the medical department in Osaka. There he is, all growth spurted up, still drawing constantly. January 1st, before he turns 18, he starts getting published for Diary of Machan, which is literally a newspaper strip that is like identical to any other newspaper strip you have ever read. It's as good, it's funny, it's cute. You can find it translated. It's not hard to find. It's a good newspaper comic. I read it and I was like, if I read this in any newspaper, I would look forward to it. Like if I opened any newspaper and went to the comics, I'd be like, Diary of Machan, my favorite one. You know, like. And he look at that little cutie. This is way before Peanuts existed, by the way. Like, but it's the same concept and content of Peanuts, pretty much. Like it's the same exact type of shit. It's not that he originated that style or anything. Just just saying. He was very good at it. And then he was also doing stage plays. Somehow he's drawing complete graphic novels and doing a newspaper. That's a daily strip, by the way. A daily for Como. Attending first-year medical school. Joins the drama club. And is drawing complete graphic novels just in his spare time. Did I like Calvin and Hobbes? I did not grow up with Calvin and Hobbes. I've probably read a book of it at some point. It's fine. I think I was like a little too old to really appreciate it by the time I actually read it. I probably would have really liked it as like a 5-year-old when I was like carrying my stuffed animals around with me everywhere I went still, So not that I don't do that today, but maybe I'd appreciate it more now, actually. More tapped into my younger self than I was probably whenever I read that. Anyway, this also obviously long predates Calvin and Hobbes. So it's mentioned here. The medical department of Osaka University holds a cultural festival where Tezuka Osamu plays piano solos. This festival leads to the formation of a student theater company, Gakuyuza, and Tezuka Osamu joins the company. Somewhere in this period is where the thing we talked about happens on the thing we talked about on Nino's stream happens. I hope this is the link I want. It's from this website. No, this isn't the article. Tezuka comics. I'll reread the quote, but I read this on Nino's stream last night because this is a super fucking fascinating historical moment to me. But I had already established, Tezuka was a huge fan of Disney. He was a big fan of, the Mickey Mouse cartoons. He liked Max Fletcher cartoons. He liked Popeye. He knew all this shit. He was he was the first otaku, in my opinion. I really think he was the first person who was in a position to be an otaku. Like the first ever time that an 8-year-old was being taken to a fucking movie theater on a regular basis to watch cartoons. That was not a concept. He was watching the first popular cartoons ever. The first ones that were ever brought overseas. Probably so Tezuka and Shotaro Ishii and Ishinomori comes a bit later though, I believe. When was he born? I'm gonna end up getting into him as I go through Tezuka, of course. Yeah, so he's about 10 years younger. So he would be the very second generation. Um, the very next one, as far apart as me from a young Zoomer, maybe a mid Zoomer. I don't know. How old are Zoomers now? I guess 10 years younger than me would be 23. So yeah, that's probably like the low end of being a Zoomer. Um, you know, so there would be like a bit of a generational difference between them, but they would probably have come from a lot of the same place, a lot of the same influences for sure. But the biggest difference between them would be that by the time Ishinomori was 10, Tezuka would have already been massively fucking famous because he became massively fucking famous at age 19. Um, and stayed that way for 40 years and then died. So it was a wild fucking ride for this dude. He just was famous for most of his life. And in a way he was famous even as a kid because again, he talks about in here, the reason I had opened this is I was trying to look for a note where he'll always mention like that everyone in school knew his comics. Like he's showing everyone in class, he's showing his teachers. His teachers have comments on them. There's one period of time where he mentions that like some of the teachers don't like that he draws comics because they're like military guys who are expecting him to, you know, shape up at some point. But then there's other teachers who are encouraging him. So like, he's kind of got a push and pull, but overall people are telling him his comics are great. And again, remember, like he's essentially inventing a media. Like imagine if somebody just like your classmate like just hands you something and you read it and you realize that nothing like this has ever existed before. And like it's not that it's mind-blowingly amazing necessarily, just that like what the fuck, like who has ever thought to make a comic book? It just wasn't a thought people were having in 1930s Japan, except for this kid. So he ends up at one point, while he's in college, he's, as he says here, in his own style, playing Mozart's Turkish March on a piano in the room where he's skipping class, and a black soldier enters the room. He says there's nothing strange about an American soldier being at the YMCA. He took a sheet of music from the piano, and once I was finished playing, began to sing in tenor. It was something I had heard before, a march. Eventually I realized it was the aria, This Butterfly Shall Fly No More, from The Marriage of Figaro. To a Mozart piece, he had responded with a Mozart aria. He was a great opera fan, this intellectual black soldier named Joe. That's right, literal G.I. Joe. One day, after learning that I liked cartoons, when I drew a quick caricature portrait of him, he brought me a mountain of American comic books. It was like the heavens opened and rained manna. There were absolutely no manga materials around at the time. I read through them like a worm, was overjoyed, and copied them obsessively. My friendship with him might have been short, but it became the reason I decided to become a manga artist. Now, obviously, what he means by that is professionally. He hadn't done it professionally yet. This moment immediately predates him deciding, maybe I should do this as a job. Now, again, I don't think Tezuka, like, I think the reason he probably wouldn't have thought that he could do that is A, again, his medium didn't really quite exist the way he was doing comics. B, his comics are super fucking edgy as a teenager. Like, incredibly violent, sexual, in implication, not like raunchy, but like they're furry, like crime epics. All right, let's go find the private edition of Lost World. So this is the oldest Tezuka manga you can actually read. The original private edition that could not be published. And he drew this when he was like 14 or 15. And it's neither a manga nor a graphic novel. This is what his art looked like as a teenager. It's not that it's like bad. It's just Um, I mean, I would even say it is good, but like it's not on the level of a professional artist, particularly at a time where like the only people who would have actually been published would have been tremendously talented. Like there wasn't this big robust industry where all kinds of, you know, creative voices are recognized. And this comic is also really confusing. Like it probably looks less confusing when I'm just scrolling through it quickly because you're just like seeing the action lines, but when you're actually stopping to read it, you really have to process what the fuck is going on in this comic. um I've read it a bunch of times now because I wrote like 25,000 fucking words just about this comic. um because it tells you it's a like many things created by 14-year-olds. This comic is a window into Tezuka's soul, particularly this chapter, chapter 3. This chapter will be duplicated so many fucking times throughout his career, not just in this book but in other books. This is to me definitional Tezuka, is this chapter. And it's about this little bunny. um I I mean the bunny is like a boy in this story, although there's been like other versions of it that have fluid gender expression is the best. There's a lot of gender fluidity in Tezuka stories, like a ton of it, like a surprising amount of gender fluidity comes up in these stories. But Mimio is one of the characters who does that in other stories, though not in this version of this one. Again, this manga, this specific manga, Lost World, this is the original version. Tezuka redrew it when he was like 18 or 19. I think his first redraw was around the time he first started getting published, because he was expecting this to be his like debut. This was like his favorite story he'd done. It's 2 fucking volumes. He made 2 volumes, 2 graphic novels when he was a kid. Um, so he readapted it, gave it to a friend, and that friend lost it in the shuffle following World War II. So then he started redrawing it again. This is after he had started getting published, but he was doing it like chapter by chapter, I guess, and they ceased publication after not very long. It wasn't working. So he retooled the story to make it more kid friendly, to remove the graphic violence and some of the more heinous implications in the story. Um, and that version ended up being his second really big hit manga. It was like his okay, so his website is confusing here, right? Because this chronology would imply, based on the way it's laid out, that Lost World, the final two, the finished graphic novels, were the first thing that came out in 1948, but they were actually the last 2 books that came out in 1948. This is a total jumbled fucking mess of a timeline here when it's not broken up by years. But the point is, it was like his 18th, like 17th and 18th graphic novel or something, but it was his second big hit after Shin Takarajima, which had been his debut. So it took him like constantly cranking out graphic novels for another year and a half after having a massive debut before he actually had a second hit. Um, it's just that he didn't stop. He just did not at any point stop continuing to draw until he had a second hit. And particularly he drew all of this while redrawing these over and over again. Like while he was attempting to redraw Lost World, he also drew all of these graphic novels. These are all graphic novels. I'm being called. Hello. Yes. I'll be right back. I gotta open the door for Bird. In the meantime, I should play something. What do I have I can play? Well, I don't know. I'll just leave this image on screen. Listen here on something else while I go. Yeah, I'm gonna resume this stream in like 10-15 minutes because I gotta do some house chores. But I'm gonna find some other Tezuka content to put on while I do that. Oh yes, this documentary is fucking incredible. So this this will give you a good sense of the kind of guy this guy was about 5 years before he died, if that.
某所のマンションに漫画の神様と呼ばれる手塚治虫の仕事場があります。デビュー以来40年間、マネージャーも雑誌の編集者も入ったことがありません。表札のないマンションの鍵はいつも本人だけが持っています。1週間のうち5日はここに寝泊まりして創作活動を続けています。
ここはもう家内しか入れないんです。で、アシスタントとかマネージャーもこの玄関までなんですね。もうそこからあとはもう何ですか、絶対もう女人禁制どころかもう男女禁制でね。
じゃあ今回我々は異例ですね。
あんまり良くないですかね、これは。どうしても良くないです。はい、
それでここで食事なんか作ることもあるんですか？
ありますよ。ここで自炊してるんです。
じゃあここは全く創作の空間っていうか密室なんですね。
もうなんていうんですかね。もうパーソナルなスペースなんですね。もう僕以外はもう絶対でこの子が入られたらもう僕はもう一日案ができなくなります。
取材班は初めてこの創作の密室に入り、漫画の神様の創作の秘密を探り出そうとリモートコントロールカメラを設置しました。音声は最新型の小型マイクでキャッチします。そしてさまざまな角度から手元や表情を捉えるため鏡を取り付けました。
大丈夫？これまで入ってるの？給料まで入ってるんですか？大丈夫です。もう取っちゃってる。なんか不気味なもんだね。こういうのに睨まれて。
取材班は24時間別室に待機し、モニターテレビとのコンクラベが始まります。密室ではレコード音楽が重要な役割を果たします。時代物を書くときはクラシック音楽がボリュームいっぱいにかけられます。そして少年漫画の場合はミュージカル音楽が軽快に流れます。3本の連載漫画が同時進行で執筆されます。少年漫画のファーストシーンを描いていたかと思うと、次の瞬間には時代物のラストシーンを描いています。そうかと思うと、3人の主人公の鼻だけをペン書きするという離れ技もやってのけます。書き始めてから2時間余り、波に乗ると驚異的なスピードでペンが動きます。3度の食事と新聞を運ぶのはマネージャーの役目です。
これっぽくないんだよ。
で今、編集長来てますけど、先生今、内緒で話したいって言ってましたけど、
それはもう何時ぐらい分かってるだけでしょ。
ともかく激励したいというふうに言ってましたけど。
激励っていうのは、要するにそうじゃないんだよ。結局、いつできるかということだけなんだよ。答えもだよね。結局そういうこと。いや、そうに決まってるよ。
レコードの他にテレビが手塚治虫の創作の秘密の一つでした。一旦仕事場にこもると全く外に出ることがありません。テレビと新聞は密室で得られる貴重な情報源です。手先は漫画に集中させながら目だけはテレビの画面を垣間見ます。その一瞬に見た画面がヒントになって壮大な長編漫画が生まれることもあります。
関係にあった2人が自分たちの欲望を満たすために邪魔になった被害者を殺した行為は許せないことでした。庄司被告に懲役20年の求刑に対して
漫画の神様も人間です。1ページを30分のペースで仕上げたかと思うと、突如としてペンが止まってしまうことがあります。
埼玉県草加市で
手塚漫画のヒーローたちは秒刻みの時間に追われ眠気と戦いながらこの狭い空間から大空を目指して羽ばたいていったのです。大阪大学医学部の学生だった手塚治虫は20歳の時まーちゃんの日記帳でデビューしました。それから40年、鉄腕アトム、火の鳥、レオ、サファイア、ブラックジャックなど一本のペン先から個性豊かなキャラクターが次々と誕生していきました。
お願いしますか。
はい、あります。どうぞ。くださいませ。
手塚治虫が自宅に帰るのは週に1日か2日です。年間60日余りです。主人のいない家庭は幼なじみの悦子夫人が切り盛りしています。3階には丸窓のあるメルヘンの部屋があります。ここには数々のキャラクターとともに少年時代の思い出を秘めた日記や作品が大事に保存されています。
おふくろの書いたアニメなんですよ。で、こういうので向こうを喜ばしてくれたわけ。だから、アニメのつまり原点ですな。
これは先生、この作文はいくつなんですか。
小学校5年生ですね、これも。5年生、もうちょっと前、4年生か。4年生の時か5年生ですね。
これは先生あれですね、ストーリー漫画の原点みたいな。
原点なんです。もう本当にこれはもう一つの、これなんかもう完全に物語になってるんですよね。大変褒められたです、これ。これは宝塚の昆虫館っていうその虫を集めてた頃にですね、やっぱりこう小学校のじゃない中学1年の時かな。でこの時はね、そろそろもういい紙がなくて、実は写真の印画紙の方がでこういうのにやっぱりかなり書いたんですけど、今この3枚しか残ってなくて、これもある人が持ってて、それを譲り受けたんです、無理やり。
これは写真じゃないですか。
違うんですよ、僕が書いたんですよ。
書いたの。
れなんかも全部足がある。はい。
一本の樫の木が手塚治虫の少年時代をかすかに留めています。昆虫マニアの手塚少年は昆虫図譜を読みふけり、虫かごを抱えて野山を駆け巡りました。小学校5年生の時、自分の名前によく似たオサムシという昆虫と出会いました。この虫は別名をゴミ虫とも言い、夜行性で暗くなると活動を開始します。親近感を持った手塚少年は名前に虫をつけるようになりました。それが今でもペンネームとして通用しています。
万博だったけどね。でこの先行くともうっそうとした森あるでしょ。あの人なんてもうすごい昆虫の方が。ここはね、町道って言ってね、町の通る道なんですよ。今あるかどうかわからないけど、このちょうど森の中をね、蝶がなんかやっぱりフェロモンっていうなんかホルモンかなんかをこう撒き散らしながら飛ぶもんだから、後からそのフェロモンを伝って、いろんな蝶が飛んでくるわけですね。で、ヒョウモン蝶とか今のクロアゲハみたいなもんとかね、どんどんもう時間を決めて通っていくわけ。だからここに待ってるとね、もういながらにして蝶取れるわけです。そういうようなこと。
宝塚で過ごした少年時代の思い出は手塚漫画の随所に登場しています。漫画の神様の脳裏にはこれまでの体験や知識が全てインプットされています。それが長い時間をかけて頭の中で発酵し、ある瞬間に泉のように湧いてきます。
もう明日が締め切りだとか今日の晩が締め切りだっていう時になって、がぜんこうムラムラっとこうなんかこうインスピレーションが湧いてくる。もう例えばここから、仮に1時間かかってあそこ行くとするでしょう。会社行くとするでしょう。その1時間の間に初めにこう5分か10分ぐらいの間にパッとこう思いついたことっていうのは、その後これはダメだからあともう一つ考えようとか、そのさらにもう一つ考えようなんて言っていくつか考えて、それで後でこうそれをセレクトしてみると、一番最初の10分っていうのに考えたものがとにかく一番いいですね、出来がね。ということはね、もう僕の発想っていうのはほんの10分ありゃいいんです。
手塚治虫は作家であるとともにスタッフ30人のリーダーでもあります。事務所に顔を出すと直ちに漫画の制作室に入り、スタッフと入念な打ち合わせをします。
まあいいや。
ここは手塚版と呼ばれる編集者たちの待機場所にもなっています。この日はいつもとは違う緊張感が漂っています。フランスで開かれる文化サミット参加が4日後に迫っているからです。
これが胸部腹部って胸部腹部、一番右、一番右、一番右、一番右。
出発までの3日間に連載漫画2本と読み切りを1本仕上げなければなりません。1日20ページのノルマを確実に果たしたとして、やっと締め切りに間に合う感情です。 マンションと制作室は直通電話で結ばれていて、指示があるとアシスタントが原稿を取りに来ます。手塚治虫はどんなに追い込まれても、キャラクターの動きや表情を描く主線と言われるペン書きは必ず自分で書きます。しかしこの日、思うようにペンははかどりませんでした。
トラブルありましてですね。
いち早く危機を察知したマネージャーは、念のため翌日分の航空券の再予約の電話を入れます。
残ってしまったんですよ。そういうことじゃなくて、だから1日ずれれば飛んでいけるっていう感じなんですよね。
編集者もアシスタントも外食する余裕がなくなりました。
おいしい。いや。もうここで何日過ごしてる？もう忘れちゃった？
確か月火でテストワークを終わらして、いや、やっぱりある程度のものは書いてもらわないと困りますけど、正直言ってとにかく完成してほしい。雑誌に穴は開けちゃいけないと思いますから。
最初 0.3 グラムより次第に量を増して実験した。
30分の仮眠を取っただけでもう12時間も書き続けています。その間に少年漫画の展開に無理があることに気づき、3ページを書き直すという痛いロスタイムがあり、ついに出発が1日延期されました。いよいよ追い詰められると、天や物を取るのも好物のきつねうどんを作るのも億劫になります。おにぎりで空腹を癒します。漫画はハングリーアートであるというのが手塚治虫の持論です。ただ一人密室にこもり、自分を痛め苦しめて原稿を書く。手塚治虫は締め切りに遅れるので有名です。編集者からは手塚治虫氏、雲隠れ才蔵と呼ばれています。しかしその都度生来の粘りと根性で危機を乗り越えてきました。フランスで華やかに日仏文化サミットの開会式が開かれた頃、東京では一人手塚治虫が修羅場を迎えていました。ペン先は全く動かなくなりました。原稿はあと20ページ残っています。フランス行きを断念するか、それとも執筆を中断してフランスに出発するか、もう猶予は許されません。
今日何時が限界？つまりそちらの丸出し。つまり編集に渡すのは。
今日は夜中でも考慮したいっていう。
そうですよね。そうですよね。ちょっと厳しいね、これね。厳しいな。困ったな、ほら。それ伸ばしてもらうわけにいかんのかな。
時間は待ってはくれません。出発の日がやってきました。 海外旅行に同伴する悦子夫人が到着しました。もう待ったは許されません。
これでも相当重いでしょ。
はい、じゃあ行きましょう。繰り返しをマーク使ってください。じゃあお願いします。スーさん、これ間違いない。スーさん、273点ね。エアフランスの。
出発ギリギリまで書いてかろうじて2本は完成しました。あと1本が5ページ残ってしまいました。空港までの車中で2ページ書き、あと3ページです。タイムキーパーを従え、まさに綱渡りのような芸当です。
もう登場は始まりました。手続きが始まりました。
でももう決まってるから、あれね。
だからギリギリでも、税関のところの引っかか
時間が問題だな。どれぐらいかかるかな。
まあ、何もなきゃそのまますると、あれですけど。
あれ、ファクシミリっていうのは何、その通り出るの？
鉛筆だとあんまり出ないです。
だからまあ、その通りで同じ大きさで。
いやいや、そうじゃなくて、原稿、なんかだいぶ荒れますから。僕は昔、関係でファクシミリやったら、ものすごく絵が荒れたんだよ。
だから、それ原稿には何年か。
トレスぐらい。
やっぱトレスには、トレスですね。
いやいやいいですか？いや、すみませんけど。入れるんだ。いいですか？じゃあ、これで失礼します。どうも、よろしくお願いしました。帰ってから、
残り3ページはフランス行きのジャンボ機内での執筆となります。この40年にコミック界は目まぐるしく変わりました。今や週刊コミック誌は300万部時代を迎えています。出版社は抜きつ抜かれつの熾烈な競争を展開しています。より良いものをより早く書いてもらうための作戦会議が日夜開かれています。
地になるっていうか、イラつくし、風呂には入れない、それからもう着替えもないと、それで、そういうのはもう、随分字で苦しんだ人が編集者には多いですよね。
いざとなるとやっぱり迫力がある方が強いですね。あんまり、手塚プロはなんていうか、あんまりこう論理的な話が通じないところだからさ、だからもうなんていうんだろう、編集者が締め切り重なって騒いでる時っていうのはね、大きな声出してね、もう間に合わないとかね、それからこう騒いで暴れた方がね、先に原稿が入るみたいなね、そういう恐ろしいところで、40年書いてるベテランだからね、こちらが逆立ちしてもいわゆるなんていうんだろう、対抗できないところあるんだけども、だから先生はもう長年の経験から編集者が誰が顔出してるとか、どういう状態で待ってるとかね、誰々さんは帰りましたとかね、誰々さんはまだ止まってますとか、いわゆるその編集者がどういう状態で、来てるかということを探り入れるところがありますよね。
ごめん、サメさん。ロボット川島、少しブレーキかけないと。
どちらからお願いしますか？
群馬です。
どちらからいらっしゃいますか？
ごとびと呼ばれる日には神田神保町に早朝から長蛇の列ができます。
どちらからいらっしゃいますか？
この日に発売される新刊本を一冊でも多く手に入れようと、関東一円から書店主がここに集まってくるのです。今は現物さえあれば確実に売れる時代なのです。
なんですか、今の時期は子供にさ、お中元代わりにね、漫画を全巻揃えてあげるっていう人がいるんだよね。
結局ほら、店頭で、ないのかってがっかりされるのは嫌だから、やっぱり結局ほら、本屋なんてのは規模が小さいから、もう5人ぐらい断ればさ、いっぱい断っちゃったような気分になっちゃうでしょ。それでね、採算逃していくんですよ。
あれは筋肉マンの。
フランスから帰ってきて、珍しく2日間の休日が取れました。こんな時に骨休めをしながら対策の構想を練ります。手塚治虫は最近作のアドルフに次ぐの発想の秘密を明かしてくれました。
なんかの本のコラムがありましてね、そのコラムにヒトラーの血の中にユダヤ人の血が混じってるという疑いがあるということを誰かアメリカの学者が喋ってるのが一行書いてあったわけ。それが発想なんです。で、後のものは全部付け足しなんです。それでその次に思ったのは、僕は昔からゾルゲが好きでね、好きでっていうかゾルゲにすごく興味持ってて、ゾルゲの評価が戦中とそれから戦後でガラッともう180度変わって、あれほど評価の変わったスパイっていうのはいないと思うんだけど、それとヒトラーと結びつけちゃったね。これはね、普通結びつけられないですよ。だからそれはもうこっちのそこがフィクションっていうかね、デタラメの最たるところなんだけど、つまり僕の場合の発想ってそういうところなんだね。もうとんでもないものを結びつけると面白いアイデアが出るんだ。落語のあれと一緒ですよ。三大話とね。このヒトラーとそれからゾルゲっていうのはもう全く関係ない人物なんだけど、そこにこう第三者を一つ作って、その第三者をその両方に絡ませることで話作っちゃおうというのが僕の発想、そういう発想の仕方なんですよね。
広島市で第1回国際アニメーションフェスティバルが開かれました。世界39カ国から著名なアニメーターが参加しています。フェスティバル副会長の手塚治虫はここでも主役を務めます。
どうもありがとうございます。peut-être que j'étais au bistrot à côté。その時には大変ね、なんかご病気が重いってことを聞いたんですけど、それはデマだったんです。Ah oui, j'étais, oui, oui, c'est vrai. J'ai eu un accident. J'ai voulu. Oui. Tomorrow film? Tomorrow product?
This was shown this afternoon.
Afternoon?
Yes.
Tomorrow afternoon?
This afternoon. It was
This
shown
afternoon?
already.
How are you? How are you? ニハオ。グラッツミッチュ。ゆっくりね、3つ。だからゆっくりそれまでに何でもお会いします。
I'd like to meet you short times.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. 後で。
See you later.
で、先生、今日あれですか、仕事は済んだんですか？仕事は。ね、済んでないですよ。まだ10枚残ってる。だいぶ怒ってるんです。孤独死が。 しょうがない。だからパーティーちょっと出てこっちでゲーム書いてで2枚なら2枚なんだあそこであれで送ってねコピーじゃないなんだっけファクシミリで送ってまたパーティー出てっていうことやらないと、まあ、地獄です。こっちが地獄こっちが天国地獄と天国行ったり来たりまあ情けないですなこういう生活。
Ah, good. I've made it back right at the part where Tezuka's talking about how being at a party is hell and being at work is heaven. Maybe he was saying the opposite. I don't remember. I'm just being funny. There are a couple of moments I really love in that documentary, particularly one where he says if anyone steps into his office, he will not have any ideas for the entire day, which is an insane thing to say. And the other one is he says, shit, I'm trying to remember what this quote was I thought was really funny. I'm remembering the part where he's like falls asleep on his desk for a couple minutes. The number one thing I took away from this documentary is that everybody looks fucking terrified of being around Tezuka. Like everyone's always got to look in their eyes like, oh God, what the fuck is he going to say? Because they know it's going to be more work for them. Whatever he's about to say, they're about to have to work harder. So everyone always just looks like scared shitless of whatever's going to come out of this dude's mouth. And he also just says absurd shit all the time, like outside of, telling people what to do for work. I really want his essays. He has a bunch of books of essays that I don't believe are translated. I would very much like to be able to read his essays in the same way that, Miyazaki's have been published in English. I'm trying to remember what the fuck the other part is I really love from this. There's a lot of him just shitting on his editors, being kind of at war with them. There's a moment where he says like the lesson he learned from trying to get into animation was mostly that other people are difficult to work with. You want his furry art to be published. All of his art is furry art. Did you see this one I posted in the Discord the other day? Where was this? Yeah. I mean, look at that. That's furry porn. I don't know what else to call that. She's in like a fucking BDSM outfit. This is literally how this movie starts. Bremen 4. It just opens with this furry alien like using a computer to pick out a human body that she's going to transform into so that she can go down to human world. Are those her actual nipples? God only knows. I mean, make of it whatever you want. She looks like a furry dominatrix, and she like puts this leaf on her head, and it turns her, because it's like a tanuki leaf or whatever, I guess, and it turns her into maybe she's a tanuki person. She looks like a fox of some sort or a deer. She looks like a bunch of animals put into one. She puts this leaf on her head, and then she turns into like a human, but she kind of still looks like an elf even in human form. And then this movie is about 4 animals that have to turn into humans in order to like save the day. And there's the transformation scenes are nuts. Let me see if these are on YouTube. It also has a scene that very clearly was ripped off in a famous scene from Akira. Yeah, this is wild. Honestly, one of the best transformation scenes I've ever seen. And that clip only had the girls. There's 2 guys who transform as well. Maybe this This will have it. No, this is like the whole start of the movie, it looks like. Yeah, this is like the OP. Which is adorable, but you know. It's a fucking furry movie. Yeah, it goes like straight from the OP into this weird ass fucking spaceship flying through space, and then it introduces Miss Furry Dominatrix here. She's like, I see Earth. I better pick out a human suit. All this without dialogue to explain what is happening, by the way. Does this version of the story have a giant mecha centaur, though? I don't know what you are referring to. But I don't know. I don't think so. Did I finish this movie? I kind of had it on in the background the other day while I was doing other shit. And I was just kind of halfway through this movie. All of a sudden, Blackjack shows up. Let me see if that's on here, actually. It's very fucking weird because he just kind of stopped. Like, the main characters, the four animals. No, this is not at all helpful. The four animals go to like a town, and there's all these like street kids, like, you know, homeless children hanging out on like a houseboat, and Blackjack owns this houseboat and like it has, I guess, adopted all of these kids and is taking care of them, and he's just there. Like, the scene, just like they show up, he explains that he's taking care of these kids, and then I don't remember if he's like, he must tell them something to do in the plot or something. I screen capped. I teach them to pickpockets and shoplift. This is what Blackjack is doing in this movie. Blackjack shows up to explain briefly, yeah, I collect orphans and teach them how to shoplift. This is the politics of Osamu Tezuka. This is why I love this man. I want to be exactly like him. Except without the racism. Although he's not really that racist after the beginning of his career. I think he learned. I guess I don't know Oliver Twist. But maybe. I wonder if I can find the shooting scene. You know, there's this scene in Akira where towards the beginning there's the dude like running through the street and he like pulls out a gun and then he just gets like ripped to shreds by bullets. There's like a death by firing squad scene in this movie that is so similar that it's like, okay, well, obviously that's what Otomo was doing. It was like, because this movie came out in 1981, so before even the Akira manga. And I know, so the reason I started doing this Tezuka project, I've had the idea for a very long time to do a series or even a channel or just dedicate the rest of my life to chronicling dead people. Because it's the most complete you can be about talking about somebody, you know, is they're literally dead. They cannot make a new thing for you to review. So I've always kind of wanted to do it, but it's very morbid. It's a very morbid idea for what if I was the emotional undertaker of the internet, you know? But I've had this idea for a long time. And I was kind of waiting to have experienced like enough death in my own life to feel ready for it. I think my cousin's suicide, like, it definitely snapped a twig in my brain that changed something. And it put me on the other side of that coin where I was like, I could do that now. I could easily just talk about dead people all the time. And I'm very good at it, particularly when someone dies. I tend to be the one who breaks the news in a way that helps people to digest the fact that they just lost someone that they must care about if I'm talking about it. So, you know, I might even have to break the news to you that someone died 40 years ago, and you're about to fall in love with them through my video and lose them all over again, you know, as is going to happen with this Tezuka project. Because eventually, when I've actually consumed all of the Tezuka content, I'll be sad that there's not more. There's just so fucking much of it. He made more than anybody else has probably ever made in the span of 40 years. There might be some people who've made more, but it must have taken them longer. Could not possibly have somebody made more than he did in 40 years. But luckily, it doesn't take as long to consume as it does to create. Most of the graphic novels, you know, you can read them in 20 minutes to 45 minutes, probably. They're not long individually. What the fuck was I saying? I lost my train of thought there for a second. Oh, yeah. I started this series inspired mostly by Satoshi Kon, because Satoshi Kon's death was the first one that really affected me at the time that it happened. And it wasn't even that I was like the biggest Satoshi Kon fan, as just that, you know, I was pretty young, and he was like the first person I'd heard of who died, and died young, you know, and wrote this fucking heartbreaking final note that I read at the time. And, you know, I kind of always thought if I ever did start talking about just dead people, like if I started a series just talking about dead artists, I would start it talking about Satoshi Kon. So I was going to do that. But there's two reasons I didn't. One, there is already a lot of Satoshi Kon content. Stevem has like a 3-hour Satoshi Kon video, and Stevem's content is really, really good. So I'm not expecting to have the best or the definitive Satoshi Kon video because, frankly, because he died so young, plenty of people have gone through his whole catalog and, you know, done the whole let's retrospective Satoshi Kon, because it's not that challenging. If you're gonna pick somebody, he's the easy target. He died so young and he was so good. To me, losing Satoshi Kon at 48 is equivalent to if we had lost any, like Miyazaki at 48, if we had lost Takahata at 48, if we had lost Maruyama at 40, like we lost a future we can't even fathom, you know, like it's impossible to calculate. His style of filmmaking died. Nothing looks like a Kon movie. He did not sire a protege, you know, in the sense of like somebody doing exactly like he was doing, or in the sense of how he was the protege to Katsuhiro Otomo of Akira fame. And so when I was thinking about doing Kon, I really wanted to lean in on trying to talk about him as an assistant to Otomo as much as I could. Like, that's the era of him that doesn't get talked about as much. Like, what were the influences Otomo had on him? And I started watching this Otomo interview, and the first thing Otomo starts talking about is Tezuka. And I went, none of this is going to make sense until I study Tezuka. Like, I'm not going to be able to talk about dead animators until I have talked about Tezuka, because ultimately it's always going to come back to him. And you can go back further from him, but you don't go back further and find another genius manga creator. You find manga creators who are successful and who had a good career and who he took influence from, but you don't find a Tezuka before Tezuka, you know? So like, particularly the fact that he started drawing when he was fucking 8. So it's not like he, you know, had this long sheet of influences before he started. He just incorporated everything he learned or saw into his manga as he went. So every single time he learned a new piece of information, he fucking wrote it into a manga somewhere. He would just sit there and watch the news while he was drawing and read newspapers for ideas, which he kind of went over in that documentary that I left y'all watching. I'll put some fucking hot honey on this pizza. We've got a fucking live grenade, y'all. I'm pulling the pin. This is just a hot sauce. Ah, well, hot honey. Granada. Look at that. Beautiful. Did I make the pizza? No, it's just it was on sale, the California Pizza Kitchen brand pizzas. So I got a couple of those for the cheap. They're all right. They would not be worth paying full price for. Not one bit. So yeah, that's what got me started on this Tezuka rabbit hole, was realizing that like there's a few good reasons. One, there is not a great Tezuka video on YouTube. Obviously it takes so much work. Who the fuck is going to be willing to do it other than me? Second of all, this is kind of as far back as the rabbit hole really goes, you know, in terms of massively influential manga artists whose influence is still felt today, you know, like who you could still go back and read Tezuka's stuff. One that I would really recommend if you like shonen manga, particularly if you like JoJo, read King Rocket. It's just one volume, but like this kid, you can see he's kind of wearing a hat that kind of looks like Jotaro, but he also wears a cape in a lot of it. So he looks a lot like Jotaro, and the story starts off in Egypt. And in the first scene, so the plot here is that it's basically Rick and Morty, where this old man is the ultimate inventor. And this is his kid sidekick, and he's also got a robot dog. And I don't want to spoil too much about the characters because there are some secrets. But the story starts off with them just like at a cafe in Egypt, and like a rowdy drunk comes in and starts causing problems. So this guy force feminizes him. He holds the guy down and injects him with a serum that makes him, with a feminization serum. He's like, that'll make him a better person. Which is just incredible, absolutely incredible. And I love the implication. Is beyond base. It's lifted, lifted all the way to heaven. So Doc here force feminizes a dude, and then right after that, a couple of like seedy guys come over and they start trying to offer them a job, and they immediately like they sit down at the table and they pass the kid like a bar of chocolate, and the kid takes one look at it and he goes, and he injects it with something, and he goes, as I thought, the serum reveals that this is poisoned. Like, he was immediately like, nah, fuck that. I haven't taken candy from no strangers. I was like, this is good children's lessons. But yeah, some cool stuff happens in this. There is a little bit of racism in this comic, just a touch. Not as much as it is in some of the earlier ones that are a little worse, but the Tezuka racism is never... Well, the ones that are truly racist are literally scrubbed from existence. Like, you cannot find what is it called? Is it Magic House? There's one of these that like, no, it's not this. No, it's one that doesn't even have, some of these don't have listings on the website at all. Like, you can see that as I go over them, you can click on these, but there's a couple of them that you can't. The Yokai Detectives, this is the one. The Yokai Detectives is the one that they really don't, and Tarzan's Secret Base. I don't think they want you to inquire about these two. They're hoping that history forgets about those two completely. Other than just to notate that they existed, that there was a comic called this, and let's leave it at that. Seems to be the mentality. But they've never been reprinted. And in the case of the Yokai Detectives, it is specifically noted that it's never been reprinted because it is so racist. Hex Code FF, I don't really consider it erasure in the sense that the original, like whoever bought this at the time, if they've preserved it, it still exists. There's just been no effort to keep it existing. You know, like ultimately, art preservation comes down to somebody deciding something is valuable and deserves to be preserved. If nobody thinks it's valuable, why preserve it? You know? Most art is thrown away. Most art is never shown to anybody. Check this out. I'm now going to create the sensation that this art was not thrown away. As you see, you had no idea I drew this until now, but now you know. I drew a bunch of attempts at trying to draw a mouse warrior girl. I also spilled a drink on it. But you know, this could have been thrown away and you would have never known it ever existed. And that's most art. Only now suddenly it exists, you know, in perpetuity. Now suddenly it lasts forever because it's in this video that hopefully stays up in some form for the rest of time. It is a bummer considering he's the godfather of anime. Here's the worst part. Losing the Yokai Detectives and Tarzan's secret base is not a big deal. Let's talk about Shintaka Ujima. Now, this manga is still somewhat racist. But that's not the issue here. So, this is the first graphic novel, as far as I'm concerned. The first cinematic comic, as I think it should be referred. You see what I mean? Look at these pages. This is literally animation. This is just a cartoon in panel form. So this to me is the birth of cinematic comics. Shin Takarajima, was there an anime adaptation of this? Not exactly. So, Shin Takarajima was created by Tezuka when he was 19 in collaboration with a guy called Sakai, what's his last name? Shichima. Sakai Shichima. So, Sakai Shichima was an established manga artist who was a part of this manga club where he was helping young talents to basically figure out how to get published. He was just like a, cool dude who Tezuka met at this club. And Tezuka presented this guy with his graphic novels that he'd just been drawing in his own time. And this guy had an offer to do something like this. There was an offer out there to make a 200-page graphic novel. So I don't know if they specifically were thinking that they were going to get what Tezuka was like offering, like they didn't use the words graphic novel obviously at the time, like 200-page manga. Whatever that might mean, there wasn't like a 200-page continuous story across varying chapters book like that. Like there had been books compiling chapters of manga, like the idea of a tankobon, but like one book that has like 10 chapters, but it's just one story. I don't know if anything like that was really around. If it was, it's probably been lost to time, unfortunately, probably lost in the war. But this was the very first thing after the war. This was like less than 2 years after the end of World War II. Tezuka gets his first publication. So Sakai Shichima Sensei, he was the one who pitched the idea. Like it was, we're gonna combine Treasure Island with Tarzan, and make it into manga. And then he didn't so much like write the story as like give the concept to Tezuka, and then Tezuka went and just created this whole manga. Now again, it called for 200 pages. Tezuka drew like 260 pages. So Shichima simply threw away 60 of them. He took the 60 least essential pages and removed them. He also redrew some of the characters because Tezuka could not really draw a strong man. So here you can see Shichima's redrawing of the Tarzan character because Tezuka's guys just didn't look right, I guess, in certain panels. So the book comes out in this edited form. It had 60 pages missing, which affect the story. Like there's stuff that doesn't make sense in the comic because of the changes made. And nonetheless, it sold 400,000 copies. It was a massive hit. It overnight created the idea that these manga graphic novels were going to be a thing, But Tezuka would not allow them to reprint this book. He wouldn't let them reprint it because it was missing so many of the original pages, and he didn't like he just didn't like it. He didn't like it because he didn't think it made sense. He thought it was incomplete. So he wouldn't let them reprint this thing. So for like 35 years, this was through hearsay, through legend, through story, through word of mouth, this legendary start of the manga craze. This was the manga that supposedly made manga as we understand it today, and nobody fucking could read it. Like, if you didn't already have one of those copies made in 1946, you had no way to fucking find this thing. And it became like a massive collector's item. Like you could find copies of this, the old OG book, for like 50 grand. There was one sold in like LA or something. I found a listing like 3 years ago where somebody sold a copy of this for 50 grand in the United States. So ever make a video about Osamu, that's exactly what I'm working on. That's why I know all of this information. Again, I said this at the very top. I am not a Tezuka expert. I only know the first few years of his career. I'm literally researching it in order because I'm trying to re-experience his life as he experienced it. Like, I'm trying to understand his art through the lens of, like, okay, well, what was at his disposal when he was 8, when he started drawing? What was he copying when he was 19, when he was when he became famous? What was it like to draw and do doctorate school at the same time? I'm kind of trying to go through his life with him and understand his art, which is what I call method journalism, my new technique of journalism. And it's difficult. It is difficult because Tezuka worked so fucking hard that trying to be like him is incredibly time consuming, and it takes a lot of effort. It also requires you to brag about Tezuka a lot. Like trying to be Tezuka requires a lot of bragging about Tezuka. The difference between the way he would do it and the way I'm doing it is that he didn't want you to know the truth, and I do. But you can't know the truth. Like I cannot tell you the truth with a capital T. There's no record for it. All I can do is put myself into the mindset of this guy by understanding his era, understanding his values, and trying to tell you like what was really going on. What was really going on here? Mostly furry. Mostly it's furry stuff. It's mostly a lot of furry stuff and a lot of gender fluidity. You'll probably not be surprised that that's the take I have found in this old anime, but that's also the take I have found in anime pretty much most of the time. And I know some of his understudies are going to take things in other directions. Not everybody who's inspired by Tezuka has this same level of abject autism. he wouldn't let them publish. He wouldn't let them republish the first manga. He wouldn't let them the reason that Osamu Tezuka is not today remembered as the father of the graphic novel is because nobody could read the first graphic novel. He didn't let it get republished. He fucking redrew it from memory 35 years later, trying to fix the inconsistencies and the artwork. So the version you can read, which is fine, is just not the original. It's just a redrawn version he did 35 years later. It's basically the same. Live Baby Hedgehog. Sounds like a better stream than this. So yeah, this is basically the first graphic novel ever. Except that you're not going to be able to read it. You can only read the redrawn version. He's incredibly Star Wars-esque, George Lucas-esque decision. He's very much like a Lucas type, a fucking a little bit of a Quentin Tarantino, a little bit of a Hideaki Anno, or a Hayao Miyazaki. Hex Code FF, and I'll say of Tezuka's racism, like, I do think he comes off racist in his depictions of certain peoples at certain times. Overall, my take is he does not like people. Tezuka does not like people. It's not necessarily a matter of, he doesn't really portray Japanese people as good. He doesn't really portray anybody as very good. Like, if they're not an inhuman character, they're usually not a good person. And like, even characters that you're kind of supposed to be on their side almost always will end up doing something fucked up to an animal at some point, and then like there's almost always a tragic ending. He was obsessed with tragic endings. If there is a happy ending in one of his manga, it's usually because they convinced him not to do a tragedy. Like either the editors or the fans convinced him out of it. But like, he always just wanted to show humans as like abusive and deserving of retribution. That's pretty much the MO behind his work. I just don't think he had a very good relationship with humanity. And once he became stupid rich, I think that became apparent to everybody why. Is like, oh, he's incredibly difficult to deal with. And now that we all have to deal with him, you know, maybe we gave him too much power. He's kind of a Kanye West, almost like an Elon Musk type, except that he never became full racist. He definitely went the other way. He became, I mean, overall, again, the message of his work is, I want love and peace in the world, and for us not to ruin it so badly that other people can't live here. Where's the part where there's like a section of this website that's literally like called messages, and it's like what he considers the messages of the work, like broadly. Yeah, message for Earth. Here we go. And each of these is like a different little message for Earth, and if you click on it, you'll get the full version. So here we go. This is the ending of Lost World. This is the redraw of Lost World, the final version that got published. I would like to show my respect for new life forms that, following the destruction of this world, take up the challenge of living toward nature. Far away from Earth, the hero of the story and a plant woman are stranded alone on an unknown planet. Have they really lost their whole future? No, they haven't. Overcoming their despair, the two turn to the future ahead. It's not a predetermined future for them, but rather one that they create on their own from scratch. And this is not merely a science fiction manga. It is actually reflected in each and every one of our own personal stories. It's easy to just sigh and give up on having any dreams for the future, but it's also the least interesting thing you can do. It's far better to make the decision to build your own future by yourself. If you can do that, then every day becomes more fun and full of the meaning of life. Dank. Beyond death. You're dead, so let's see what you had to say about it. If you really love someone, your feeling transcends life and death. Do you lose your love for a person when he or she dies? No, of course you don't. People can keep on loving even after the person is gone, and the memory of your great love remains forever. Love goes beyond the borders of life because it dwells not in the body, but in the spirit. Though the body may pass away, the spirit does not. The wonderful feeling that one is loved, the spirit filled with this kind of happiness, may be the true greater love that envelops the entire world. Hey, Butthole Weeb with $2. We actually got a super chat here. Popeye-san and Olive Oil Chan is his best work. Yeah, he definitely. Hold on, let me get the Popeye scene. So I've been showing you the original Lost World, and there's a page that was missing because the private edition, that's like the first version he drew, it was missing like a substantial number of pages. They still just consider this fact. Tezuka did not let them republish the original Shin Takarazuka, but he did let them publish the version of Lost World that he created when he was a teenager that was missing like dozens of pages. And it's because he always wanted Lost World to be an adult-oriented manga with these darker, violent moments. And he had to tone it down for the version that got published. And apparently he tried to redraw it a fourth time, a fourth redraw, so a fifth attempt at the manga in the 50s, and it only got published for a little bit and then cut off, and I have not found any information about that one, like what it looks like or anything. But yeah, he was definitely obsessed with it, and I think that he allowed that publication simply because he wanted the world to understand what his intent had been with the story, but knew that he just simply could not like redraw it again. But anyway, there's this is the redraw version, the version that did get published originally. And it ends with, so the cute little bunny girl, or bunny boy actually, I thought it was a girl the whole fucking first half of the manga. The main character is Mustachio and Michan here. And Michan ends up fucking exploding in a giant rocket explosion and dying. And everyone's coming to try to check on the rocket and the big explosion. And so it's this massive splash page, but you can clearly see here Popeye the Sailor Man. You can clearly see Donald Duck. You can clearly see some what looks like Hello Kitty, but she didn't exist yet. I can't remember who this guy is, but he's from an old comic book. I know it. But yeah, this is basically fucking Daikon 4 before Daikon 4. Like, he literally crammed. These characters are from his newspaper comics. So like all of his characters are in here. Like any character he had put into a story before this point, this was like his big end zone dance of, oh my god, I finally fucking got Lost World published, you know? So so we had to create this and yeah, the bunny dies. This manga starts off, the original version, the private edition that he wrote when he was 14. It starts off with Mustachio saying that this the thing is, the original book is written from Mustachio's perspective. It's supposed to be like his notes on this thing that happened. And he's like, I lay this note at the foot, at the boot of my beloved Michan. Michan being the bunny. And then there's like a notation about how like sad he is about what's about, what he's about to tell you is this incredibly tragic story, and he's still haunted. And he describes how the familiar scent is no longer resting with the boot a mere week later. Familiar scent from the boot. I'm just saying, man, he was on some freaky shit, even from a young age. I don't know what kind of fucked up porn he found in his childhood, but I didn't even get to what I wanted to show you from original Lost World, which is how fucking violent it gets. So chapter 3 of original Lost World is where the rabbit explains that it was originally an ordinary rabbit, but it was bought by a guy who was going to skin it, a fur trader, but then he was repurchased by a scientist who went insane trying to create this experiment that would give a human brain to the rabbit. But in his insanity, he eventually had an epiphany, and he did figure out how to remove the rabbit's brain and reconstruct it so that it would think like a human, thus producing Michan, our rabbit that we love today. And then we go to the school where they're doing it to other animals and teaching them how to be like humans. So that whole plot line comes up almost constantly in his work, like creating something human, like turning something that wasn't all the way human into something human that ultimately proves itself to be morally superior to humans, usually with someone literally telling them by the end of the book that they are better than humans. It happens in like all of his early books. There's a huge, so his artwork starts to improve around here. This is where we're like halfway into the story, and he starts doing these big fight scenes, and the artwork starts getting a lot better. And like this is still before he even like discovered all those Disney comics and like really honed his skill at, like honed his particular art style. But like you can see the development, the struggle. This is something he drew like a shitload of times too, is like coming up out of a body of water to find a mysterious house and then going inside of that house to find like a tunnel. This happens a bunch, and in one of them, like somebody comments that it's like a dream, which makes me think that it's literally a dream. He probably like a recurring dream he was having. He just kept drawing it. All right, I think yeah, this is the chapter. Okay, so Mustachio here had fucked over this guy, this bad man. Bad man comes in, kicks Mustachio, whips him, and then proceeds to just beat the fuck out of him for like 3 straight pages until Mustachio is a bloody pulp on the ground. And after he's done so, he comes walking out of the room and says, "This seemed to relieve me." So Tezuka drew his guy getting the shit beat out of him for 3 pages, and then a guy saying, "This has relieved me." I was just thinking, like, if my classmate handed me this book and I got to that chapter, I'd be like, "Are you fucking all right?" Like, our main character Mustachio then spends the next like chapter and a half just covered in blood, like just absolutely wrecked. This does not happen in the remake. Make the screen bigger. Yeah, all right. Here, let's go back to the start of this chapter real quick. So you can see this man get his ass absolutely rocked. You see him just getting shit canned, beat to fuck, left in a bloody puddle, continuing to be a bloody puddle even after he gets up and, just spends like a chapter like this, just fucked up. In the remake, it's like one panel of the guy spanking him just on the ass, and then you know, there's no there's no blood or gore or anything like that. So this is the side of Tezuka that he wanted people to see from when he was literally 14. And when he actually started getting published, they kept telling him, you have to tone your stories down for young boys. And it's like he was a young boy. This is what young boys draw, you know? But the publishers didn't want that. So he found lots of ways to be edgy anyways. Like if you read his comics, they don't read as not edgy. They read as censored, you know, like or toned down on a visual level from something that conceptually is just as dark. The funniest thing about Lost World is in the original story, a scientist and a woman who is a plant that's got a human consciousness like become a couple. And in the remake, the exact same thing happens, but the publishers didn't want the suggestion that a human and a plant person got together. So they changed the dialogue so that she says, I wish you were my brother. And like, oh, now we can be brother and sister together. But the last lines of the story are like the announcement that like, well, these humans who were left on this planet that only visits Earth every 5 million years are going to be the new Adam and Eve and create a species of human plant hybrids that might revisit Earth when the planet comes back. That's all still in there. So the changing the dialogues that instead of her saying I want to be in a relationship, instead saying I want to be your sister, now means that the brother and sister are repopulating that planet. So that backfired tremendously as a censorship attempt, which Tezuka notes like on the website. He's like, yeah, I don't know, this doesn't make any sense. Like they kind of ruined the ending, and and it's bonkers now. But okay. Yeah. What else do I want to say? I've gone over a lot of stuff that I'm going to talk about in this big video, but as you can see, this is 84 pages that I've written here. And I want you to hear a lot of this stuff more than once, because this is anime, manga. This is the history. Like, this is how it started. This is the life of like the most important guy in manga. And at least on YouTube, I've never seen him really be talked about in any kind of depth. So I'm hoping to bring more of that into the public consciousness. Slowly. Because it takes time. Again, his catalog is unfucking believable. Look at just, where's that? Where did I put the timeline at? Chronology. So like where I am at in my writing, I have 84 pages, and I am currently reading Pistol Angel. So I've gone through Machan's Diary, A and B's Expedition. Those are just newspaper comics. Shin Takarajima, You Cannot Find King Kong. Dr. Mars is good. I would probably recommend it. Golden Bat, You Cannot Find. And that was actually done in collaboration, I think, probably with the guy who created Golden Bat, because he also did a Golden Bat manga that year. But I'm not sure. But it seems to be an adaptation of one of the Golden Bat plays. Or what are they called? Kamishibai theaters. Is that what they're called? Whatever. And then I went through all of these. I've done this whole year, which starts with Mysterious Underground Men, which is probably my favorite one that I've read so far. It had the most emotional effect because it recharacterizes Mimeo the bunny into a more interesting character. Couldn't find Tuberculosis. Four Fences of the Forest is easily the worst one I've read so far, but it's got some fun stuff in it. Secrets of the Jungle I couldn't find. The World in 1,000 Years I couldn't find. King Rocket was very fun. Very, very much proto Shonen Jump. Like, this is exactly what Shonen Jump feels like. Couldn't find The Mooney Man. Couldn't find Magic House. Yokai Detectives doesn't exist. Couldn't find Masked Adventure Kid, which is a shame because that seems to be his first Western, even though Pistol Angel claims to be his first Western on the website, whatever. Couldn't find Tarzan's Secret Base and couldn't find The Streamlined Incident, which I would like to be able to read. A lot of these seem really interesting, but I couldn't find them. And then, I've read the Lost World remake as well. And now I'm on Pistol Angel is actually the first of these four, so I haven't gotten to Metropolis yet. And then, his timeline just continues and 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 continues. And one day it ends. But look at this. This is all at the same time. Like this is not all right. Sorry Mama, The Mysterious Boy, Captain Ozma, The White Pilot, Brave Dan, Mighty Adam, Number 7, The Devil Garon, The Spirit of the Wild Rose, Young Ropu, The Ant and the Giant, and The Iron Road, all practically at the same exact time. This is insanity. Total insanity. It's also funny how few graphic novels he did after a certain point. Like, unless they're just not really being listed anymore, maybe they're just being listed on the side here because they can't fit. I don't know, but there's way fewer individual stories and way more series after a certain point. But this is how you end up on the run from your editors, I think, is all of this. I'm not even there. I have not even made it to the start of his very first major known serialized work, The Jungle Emperor. All right. I'm going to end this stream now. Here's my message to everybody. First of all, get me all the Tezuka information you can. Look into him. Read some Tezuka. Read King Rocket and Dr. Mars and Lost World and The Mysterious Underground Man. Those 4 are worth doing. We will do Umineko tomorrow. I'm not going to do as much live streaming as I had been doing because of the main reason I was doing it was to try to make money really quickly for the sake of trying to get into a new place. And my dad is going to help me do that anyway. So I'm not in the immediate need of money now. And the live streams are not really they're not like a long-term investment. They make some money right then and there, but like they're not content that people are really going to go back to. The clips are nice, having clips that can be revisited more easily. I hate having to take them myself, so it really just comes down to whatever other people are willing to do. But ultimately, the content I am known for, the content that will stand in perpetuity, is me doing like long form, analytical, deep dive anime content, and this is kind of the ultimate one. It's like hard for me to imagine a more serious, I guess, subject matter or a more compelling, something more, I don't know. What's the word I'm looking for? Necessary. Something more necessary. There's not something I can think of for me to do that is more necessary than to be the first person to like fine tooth comb through Tezuka's whole entire fucking life, for anime YouTube. But the reason I did this live stream to thought dump all of this is that I won't have like this video won't be done forever, like you'll never hear me say all this stuff till later. And I don't want that. I don't want you to be in such a different headspace from me for the next because the last 4 or 5 days, I was, I've been heavily posting Tezuka stuff on Twitter and talking about it here and there, but nobody really knew why I was excited. Like I'm dropping little stuff, but like nobody gets why am I so excited about Tezuka? Because I can't just read you the 84 pages, but the core information that's in there, the stuff that made me so excited, that's the stuff I've been sharing with you. It's like, this is the stuff that makes me like, wow, this guy is so interesting. Wow, I have to talk about this guy. Like, wow, this is the, listen to all these little tidbits I've learned so far. I can go more in depth about all of that, and I do in the script, but this is like the taste of it so that you get where I'm coming from, so that you're not like, what's Trixie doing? Like, why is she not on the internet as much all of a sudden? Where's my live stream show? This is where your live stream show is. It is being consumed by a necessary piece of what's the phrase I came up with? Method journalism. Thank you. So I want you all on the ride with me, and when it comes to live streams, like the Umi Neko show is the only one that I've ever considered like necessary, in the sense that I knew I was going to do it for years. Like, it's not something that I just spur of the moment came up with, or like, I'm doing live streams now, let's come up with some live stream ideas. Like, I still want to finish Brigadoon and do the Rosin Maiden stream with Ellen. But I'm not trying to overburden myself by like coming up with a bunch of other shows to fill in the blanks. If I do another Fix Trixie, it'll be totally at random. That was fun to do, but it didn't nobody really had fucking that much for advice for me. It was like, become a VTuber. Okay. Maybe I will. I kind of don't want to, so I don't know if I will even do that. But yeah, I'm more interested in trying to do something that will have a lasting effect, that will change the way people understand anime and manga, as my work has done many times, and to be revisitable, not just because it's a good video, but because it's like got information that doesn't exist outside of it. That's part of my goal. At the very least, my interpretation of Tezuka's life will be very different from anyone else who's written about him. So anyway, you came in right when I'm wrapping it up. Walks away. Wait. Say something to the audience before I hit end stream.
Something to the audience.
Oh my god. He did it. He did it, gang. All right. Later, everybody.